A man escapes China on a jet ski. Xi Jinping mysteriously disappears during a summit in South Africa, and China's enemies are teaming up. That and more on this week's China News Headlines. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. This episode is sponsored by Incogni. Now, you probably know that companies are collecting your personal data, but you may not realize just how many. Dozens, maybe hundreds, most of which you've never heard of, and you have no idea what they're doing with them. Incogni helps stop them. I'll explain more at the end. Did you know you can jet ski from China to South Korea? Yeah, I didn't either. That is until this guy did it. South Korea's Coast Guard said a 30-something-year-old man on a jet ski called for help after getting stuck near the coast of Incheon earlier this month. All he had with him was a compass, binoculars, a helmet, his life vest, and some containers of fuel. And I would add to that a lot of courage. The human rights organization Dialogue China identified him as Kwang Pyong, an ethnic Korean who was living in northern China where his family had a business. He reportedly started from Shandong province in China where he was fleeing an exit ban. Kwang Pyong was imprisoned in China for a year and a half for supposedly inciting subversion of state power. His crime? Insulting state authority and the socialist system on Facebook and Twitter. That plus apparently wearing this Hitler t-shirt. Yeah, Xi Jinping is very image conscious. It's probably a good thing he wasn't wearing one of our Shinny the Pooh t-shirts, because if he had, he might still be in jail. And you can too. I mean, get a Shinny the Pooh shirt, not go to jail. Just check out our merch store at chinauncensored.tv/merchandise. The link is below. Kwang Pyong was detained by South Korean authorities because he illegally entered South Korea's territory without permission. He says he's trying to get asylum, preferably in an English-speaking country. Kwang Pyong isn't the only one evading China on the high seas, though. The Philippines says it dodged another Chinese naval blockade this week. Two Chinese Coast Guard ships tried to block a Philippine Coast Guard boat that was on a resupply mission in the South China Sea. The Philippines says it was able to get around the blockade and supply its Marines, who live on this old boat on the Second Thomas Shoal. The shoal is within the Philippines' exclusive economic zone, but China claims the shoal belongs to it, as well as the rest of the Spratly Islands around it. The Philippines put the ship and Marines there to stake its territorial claim. Despite an international tribunal ruling in 2016 that China's claims are bunk, Beijing rejected the tribunal's ruling and continues to act like it owns the entire South China Sea. Speaking of China's neighbors, South Korea and Japan joined the U.S. in signing a Trilateral security agreement last week. They agreed to consult each other in a timely manner over security threats, create a crisis hotline, meet in person at least once a year, share early warning information on ballistic missiles, and hold a series of joint military exercises. And all three countries are worried about North Korea, which just tried to launch a satellite into space to spy on the U.S. and South Korean militaries. But a big reason that South Korea and Japan are burying the hatchet now, after years of animosity, is China. The three countries condemned China's dangerous and aggressive behavior and unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea, as well as its illegal fishing practices. As I mentioned earlier, China has claimed a large part of the South China Sea as its own, despite having no legal basis for its claims. And there's a lot of concern about what could happen to all the shipping that flows through the sea if China has more control. My favorite state-run media, the Global Times, called the alliance a destructive miniature of NATO that was targeting China. To which I say, yes! And the reason it exists is because you don't follow international laws. Speaking of Japan, Hong Kong is threatening to ban some Japanese seafood starting August 24th. That's the date Japan is planning to dump treated water from its Fukushima nuclear reactor into the ocean. The International Atomic Energy Agency signed off on the plan, saying the water is safe. But China's deputy foreign minister says it's still a risk and that China will take action if Japan goes ahead with the release. Is China's outrage real? Probably not. For more on China's hypocrisy on this issue, check out this video we did. The link is below. After this week's BRICS meeting in South Africa, many are now wondering, what happened to Xi Jinping? He unexpectedly skipped a key business event. And what makes it even more mysterious is that no one is saying why. Xi met with South Africa's president earlier in the day and was scheduled to give a speech at a key business event. But without any explanation, China's Commerce Minister delivered the speech instead. It didn't seem like it was planned because China's foreign ministry published his speech and forgot to edit out the part that said it was given by Xi. Later in the day, he attended a dinner with other BRICS leaders, so it was just that one event that he didn't go to. And just to add to the mystery, as Xi was walking through the doors on a red carpet walk past the media, someone closes the door on his staff. You can see he's looking over his shoulder, wondering what's happening, and even awkwardly pausing, waiting for them to catch up. The door opens a crack, but then closes again. And when they don't come out, he continues on. We have an episode about the whole BRICS summit coming out next week, so if there are any updates, we'll let you know there. And after the break, New Zealand says China is one of its biggest national security threats. Welcome back. A judge in Florida has ruled that a Florida law banning some Chinese property purchases can be enforced. The law prevents Chinese citizens from buying property within 10 miles of a military installation or critical infrastructure over spying concerns. It also prevents them from buying farmland so the Chinese Communist Party doesn't take control of the U.S. food supply. A group of Chinese nationals and a real estate firm challenged the law, saying it was discriminatory and stigmatizing, but the judge ruled that because the law was written based on nationality and not on race or ethnicity, that wasn't the case. The plaintiffs said they were planning to appeal, so this probably isn't the last we'll hear about this case. But speaking of China being a national security threat, New Zealand's intelligence agency accused China of foreign interference. In a declassified report, the agency said China was one of 3 countries that persistently and opportunistically conduct espionage operations against New Zealand. The others mentioned in the report were Iran and Russia. However, it said the most notable threat was the continued targeting of the nation's diverse Chinese communities by people with links to the intelligence arm of China's ruling Communist Party. And in other national security news, TikTok. A recent poll by Reuters and Ipsos found that close to half of American adults favor banning the app. 47% said they at least somewhat supported a ban, while 36% were opposed and 17% said they didn't know. So Biden, what happened to that ultimatum that TikTok either had to be sold or be banned? There hasn't been any recent news about what Biden's planning to do, but details of an old draft agreement were recently leaked to Forbes. The year-old draft shows TikTok's plan to avoid being banned in the U.S. And, spoiler alert, it gives the U.S. government a lot of control. I can already see it now. Biden's TikTok versus Trump's Truth Social duking it out. And next up will be Elon's X versus Zuckerberg's Threads. You know, I'm not usually into wrestling, but those are some fights I would pay to see. In the draft agreement, the U.S. government could do things like block changes to TikTok's U.S. terms of service, moderation policies, or privacy policy, get a say in who the company hires to oversee U.S. data security, and in some circumstances, even force the owners to just shut the app down in the U.S. In addition to government supervision, the agreement lists a number of third parties that would audit the company. I don't know about you, but I would rather have the U.S. government controlling TikTok than the Chinese Communist Party. But wouldn't it be even better if it were just banned altogether? Seriously, with all the weird trends that come from TikTok, I think we're officially devolving as a species. And after the break, China's economy is on life support. Welcome back. The vital signs are not looking good for China's economy. The government has been trying to encourage spending by cutting a key interest rate this week. The central bank lowered the one-year prime rate this week from 3.55% to 3.45%. However, the bank didn't change the 5-year equivalent, which is seen as a benchmark for mortgage pricing. And there was a continued stock sell-off after crushed expectations that the rate would be cut by more than it was. This follows cuts to a range of key interest rates last week that the government was hoping would kickstart the flagging economy. This comes after news that China's economy has slipped into a period of deflation for the first time in 2 years. Many consumer prices are down in China, which is good news for consumers, but also shows there's weak demand. And at the same time, Wall Street banks' dreams of making it big in China are slipping away. 2 years ago, asset manager BlackRock became the first global asset manager to operate in China alone, meaning it didn't have to merge with the Chinese company. At the time, CEO Larry Fink called China one of the biggest opportunities. BlackRock was urging investors to triple their investments in China, despite increasing regulatory risks. But now, just 2 years later, BlackRock is not seeing all that opportunity anymore. BlackRock ranks 145th among nearly 200 Chinese mutual fund houses in terms of domestic assets under management. According to the Wall Street Journal, that could be because native Chinese banks offer a wider variety of products. But the other trend hurting foreign asset managers is that foreign investors are giving up on China. According to Stephen Roach, a former chairman of Morgan Stanley Asia, Western business models that were operating freely in China just a couple of years ago are being challenged every month. The environment is much, much tougher today than it was. Not helping matters is the government's directive to companies not to be upfront about their challenges. Beijing is pushing companies who are considering an IPO overseas to tone down the risk of government policies and China's business environment in their IPO prospectuses. If they don't, the China Securities Regulatory Commission could withhold regulatory approval for their IPOs. Yes, in China, the best way to inspire confidence in your country's terrible economy is to lie about it. And this episode is sponsored by Incogni. Whenever you do anything online or use apps on your phone, there's a huge number of companies that collect your personal data. When I signed up for Incogni, I discovered there were dozens of data brokers that potentially had my private information, without my permission. And these companies can get hacked, spreading my private information even more widely. So what can you do? Get as many companies as possible to delete your data off the internet, and that's what Incogni does for you. Incogni has already gotten my details removed from 99 of these data brokers, with a lot more in progress. And I didn't have to do anything after signing up. Incogni just handles it. So I recommend you get Incogni for yourself. Click the link below or go to incogni.com/uncensored. The first 100 people to use the code uncensored will get 60% off. Get your personal data off the market with Incogni. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.